Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Uxcel webinar. My name is Sofia, and I'm Uxcel's community manager, your host for today's session. This webinar is a part of our free webinar series where every single month we make an effort to bring you the absolute best experts from around the world to share their insights, real-life expertise, and journeys in UX. For those who are joining us for the first time, this is a live session, so we make sure to keep them live so that you get the chance to talk to the people that we bring on. So help us get to know you a little bit better. Tell us your name, where you're tuning in from, and what do you hope to get out of today's session. And that being said, the live Q&A will be reserved for the last 15 minutes of our webinar. So feel free to post your questions then, or if you hear something that resonates even before that, feel free to post it and we will cover it in the Q&A. And if you want to catch any of the past episodes, you can always check that out on our YouTube channel in the lives section. Without further ado, I would like to introduce today's topic and our lovely guest. So, you all know the title of the webinar, but let's talk about what goes beyond portfolios. So we know that, once you crafted your portfolio or your CV and you got the interview, what now? How do you present yourself? How do you position yourself? How do you basically tell the hiring team, hey, I am the right fit for you? So those are kind of the questions that we will be covering with our guest today. And I'm really, really happy to be joined by Lena. She's a product design and UXR hiring expert. She has been working as a recruiter before, and even now she's helping companies and individuals with hiring. She's been working in Miro before, helping build one of the best design teams. So I'm really, really excited to hear more from her. And I hope you are too. Again, feel free to stick until the very end of the webinar for the live Q&A where you can ask Lena your questions. But yeah, Lena, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Welcome. How are you doing?
Thank you so much, Sophia. I'm very excited to be here. Very cool topic. Thank you so much for inviting me, and super excited to, share a little bit and answer all the questions as well.
Awesome. So before we begin, do you want to give us a little intro to yourself, or will that be included in the conversation or your talk?
There will be some introduction in my talk, but I'm focusing more on metrics, what I've done to build some credibility. But I think what's important to mention in a short introduction now that I started supporting the job seekers a couple of years ago when the market got very, very tough. And all the advice that I'm sharing is coming from the other side of the recruitment tunnel, right? Because I am, as you said, I'm hiring, I'm helping teams to scale. I've worked at N26 and Miro, and those are very driven by high quality of design and user research companies. And so far it's been a very fulfilling journey, and I've been seeing a lot of impact and a lot of success from people who use in my strategies, because that's indeed what hiring teams want to see. And myself, I'm also a career switcher, so I've moved from recruitment into research. I've been a part of the layoff, so I've been there everywhere. I've done it all. So really hope that I'm going to share a lot of compassionate advice to those who have been a part of any of those situations, and will be able to help them as well.
Awesome. Looking forward to that. I will bring up your presentation here.
Amazing. Cool. So as Sophia said, there are many important things in the job search. CV, portfolio, there's of course network and getting to know the right people and getting the door into the foot into the right door. But I think what's really undervalued, but at the same time, it's extremely important and impactful part of your whole candidate persona is how you pitch yourself. And pitching is indeed, it's a process, and this is something that you have to get used to and build your own pitch. And so hopefully today I'm going to explain a little bit what is it, why is it important, what is the difference between good pitch and bad pitch, and at what point to do that, and things like that. To kick off, also, once again, the building credibility part, which I think is very, very important. I'm going to pitch myself, if you will. So I've scaled recruitment and research teams at Miro at N26. So these were two hypergrowth experiences, which means that I've hired quite a few people, and I've also literally screened thousands of CVs, portfolios, heard hundreds of people, and this is where the whole experience of like giving that back to community comes from. I've also worked as a user research at Miro, which means that I kind of understand design from the inside. I'm now the founder of my recruitment and job search consulting or boutique agency, whatever you want to call it. But basically what that means, I'm partnering with companies to hire talent, and I train the talent how to get hired. And I find this synergy to be very productive. And I also have my own course on Maven, and I do one-on-one sessions. Basically, if anyone wants my help and get me on the call, it's very much possible. And I'm trying to make them successful in their job search journeys. Just to understand a little bit what it means in numbers, so I've scaled teams to 100 plus people. It doesn't necessarily maybe sound as much across my whole career, but that just means that we were going after like the best of the best talent, or like the most niche roles. And that taught me understand what very picky and tricky roles require and how to sell yourself for those roles. I've also interviewed thousands of people, and it sounds scary to me to hear that, but that also means that, you know, when you see very strong patterns, you can tell by how the candidate pitch themselves or how the candidate builds the case study, what is the success kind of rate or percentage that they're gonna convert into the hire. And so I think that's very important to understand for everyone who's interviewing, how experienced their recruiter, for example, is, and like how many similar roles they've gone through. I also led very different hiring processes for senior, for staff, for lead, for manager, for director, senior director, and even the C-level role in design. So that just helps me understand across seniorities, like what good and bad as well looks like. And I've advised 300 plus people, which is insane. I'm so just happy, very proud of this number, to be honest, because many of them got jobs. And once again, it's not for me to brag about myself, how many people I've worked with. It just means that many things that I'm sharing just proven to work and already have a lot of data behind. And so the things that I'm going to be sharing today is not just a presentation that I put in ChatGPT and said, hey, what are the good ways to pitch yourself? This is something that I've been telling for months and months and months, and I've been seeing people getting offers through following through these advices. So I really hope it's going to be very useful. So my very high level advice to everyone how to win the offers is that you have to pitch yourself like no one can. Literally, the first interactions with your recruiter, with your hiring manager, maybe even with the team to some point, this is how you make an impression, because we all have to remember that we're working and talking with humans, and humans are biased and sometimes even maybe a little bit judgmental. And so we need to bias them for us, not against us. And you can do that by actually giving the information to those humans that they need. Interview is a professional setting. The interview with the recruiter, the interview with the hiring manager, they have very similar yet still different agendas. And so you need to be able to adapt yourself, your pitch, the depth of the insights that you give to make sure that you're giving and providing the insights that are expected. And the better the quality of the insights, the more chances to succeed. So in very short, the pitch is your story. So many people come to me and say, yes, but I cannot pitch this and that because maybe I don't feel that it's the best role to pitch. And I'm like, why? Like, this is your story. This is your blank canvas. I know nothing about you. Tell me what you're proud about. Tell me what your strengths, because unless you tell me, I will never know. So this is your opportunity to build your candidate persona and pitch everything amazing that you've done. So you should feel confident about saying things, and you should feel comfortable about telling the great things that you've done, because this is your opportunity to make a very good impression and maybe even catch a little bit of this halo effect, right? Halo bias. So if you see that I've done something that you've done, don't forget to mention that this is the face-to-face interaction. You make me like you much better. And that's how psychology works, because recruitment is a lot about psychology. It's also your sales pitch. You have to get into this mindset of a salesperson. People like, yeah, but I told about myself and I said, that's my name and this is what I want to do. And that was it. No, I'm sorry. You have to sell, and you have to sell well. You need to rehearse this story. This story needs to flow. You need to engage me. And you also need to make sure that I can pay attention to your story for more than 30 seconds, as many videos actually kind of, train our brain against. So it's really important to really, build it from the perspective that this is your only chance to succeed if you pitch really, really well. This is also your perspective on what success was, what your learning was. Sometimes you would pitch and highlight the biggest strengths. Sometimes you would pitch and highlight the actual fail and what you've learned out of it. And it's totally okay. This is your space to create your own story and the narrative of your experiences. However, major strengths have to be highlighted, and they also need to be actually kind of speaking to the major competencies that the company is looking for. Do they want someone who can solve complex problems? Make sure that you pitch about it. Make sure that you say that this project was very complicated because the problem space was just so ambiguous and so vague and so big, and yet I was able to identify what was the problem and how to deal with that. It needs to be very, very clear. I mean, honestly, this is a very disappointing experience when you go into the conversation with the candidate, for example, as a recruiter, and the candidate does not remember what they've done. They just go and they look around and they're like, oh, 1 second, let me think what else I've done. Let me think where else I've worked. I'm sorry, just put your CV in front of you. Like, look at your LinkedIn. It's totally okay. I don't care if you're actually looking at the document and kind of supporting yourself, but you need to be able to build that very engaging story with a clear narrative of where you began, who you are right now, what you want to do in the future. It's the story. It has the beginning, the middle, and the end. And usually you start pitching to the answer of, tell me about yourself. So when I say, tell me about yourself, I do not mean to say, hi, I'm Lena, I live in Berlin, and I really like to eat sushi, and, all of those things that some people sometimes start telling. And it's totally okay to go personal. It's totally okay to say, ever since I was little, I loved drawing, and that's what brought me into design. Ever since I was little, I was very interested about technology or like hardware, and that's what got me into engineering. This is amazing. I want to know that drive and that passion for a certain role was coming from somewhere. But you need to understand that that's a professional setting once again. And so you need to pitch about your experiences and things that you've done, you've learned, you've achieved, and you accomplished. When should you pitch yourself? So I already told you that recruiter screen and the hiring manager call, which usually go together, are the places where you're gonna be pitching about yourself. Because afterwards, normally you would go into the task. Afterwards, you would have like a team round or a cross-functional round. You may have leadership round, maybe like with the founder or like a chief people officer, chief product officer, whatsoever. And then there is an offer and hire. So your recruiter screen call and your hiring manager screen call are the amazing opportunities for you to pitch about yourself, what you've done, what you've accomplished, and what you've learned. Many people ask me, is that the same pitch? Is it something that you need to say word by word? And I think that's a great question to ask. So for the recruiter screen, you normally want to spend some time and talk more high level. Like, I've spent that many years in design. I worked across XYZ industries. I worked on web, desktop, app, things like that. With the hiring manager, you might want to go a little bit more in depth, right? So if you speak about very high impact project, you might want to say that, we accomplished this and that, and maybe we moved that metric by that much. And then afterwards, you may want to say, would you like me to dive into that and show you maybe on the deck, on the slide deck or portfolio, or explain you a little bit more how exactly we accomplished that. So you're basically using the same pitch, but you leave more space for the hiring manager call to dive into some of the aspects of your pitch and just get a little bit more information. Now, bad pitch versus good pitch. I would literally say that it's a very easy difference between good way to pitch yourself and bad way to pitch yourself. A very good pitch is, once again, sales talk. So you highlight the things that I want to know and you leave me literally with no questions. The less questions I have to ask after you pitch yourself, the better the impression. I feel that you know exactly what I want to know about you. I feel that you understand exactly the core of the role, the core of the impact that you need to bring to the company. Imagine that I have 6 bullet points that I need to tick out in my scorecard. And while you pitched, you ticked all of them. It's amazing. Our conversation is 10 minutes. I give you a strong yes, and then the hiring team is extremely excited to talk about you. A bad pitch is when you literally created more questions than any answers in my head. Because A, you didn't know really what to talk about. B, you weren't ready to talk about your experiences. C, you didn't talk about them, but you were kind of, beating around the bush and maybe spent like a lot of time on your university degree when you're actually applying for a senior role. So let me clarify a little bit more in details. A bad illustration of a pitch would be an introduction. So you spend 1 to 3 minutes, you say your name, maybe your current role, maybe you speak a little bit about the years of your experience, maybe even relevant industries. And so far, it doesn't sound so bad. But then you would kind of say one key strength and why you want to be a product designer or why you want to be a user researcher. And then you would say, and now I'm looking for a full-time job and, I'm excited to be here. And that is it. I did not learn anything about you. I do not know why exactly you're talking to me as the company, why not any other company. And it is very important that you highlight somehow motivation. And yes, some products are not very interesting or sexy to work for. And it's totally okay. Yeah? Think enterprise. We all know it's not very fun, but it's extremely impactful. You create a lot of legacy as well. And at the same time, you can always find some correlation of your personal purpose with the purpose of the company. And that's where things get very inspirational for the company to bring you on board. So let's look at the intro parts and let's kind of move into the pitch part. The good pitch would be 5 to 7 minutes. Don't get married to that number. It's honestly, this is just the number that I have identified as an average that every good pitch takes. That's enough time to give me a lot of information, not to speak too fast, and kind of confuse me and overwhelm me, because up until recently I had to take notes. Now, of course, we can all take notes, with the AI tools, but still, you want to make sure that it's more like a conversation rather than you just throwing things at me. So 5 to 7 minutes is a great time frame for you to kind of put yourself in. You also want to make sure that your narrative and communication styles in general is very, very clear, that you know where you begin, that you have this interesting hook of your kind of, story, being like, ever since I was little, once again, or, I spent 6 years in design and now moving into research because I realized X, Y, Z. So I want to know a little bit more about you as a person, but actually I am here to learn more about your experiences, your skills, and things like that. I want you to speak about all your key achievements. And I mean, don't go crazy. Of course, if you work for 25 years, maybe it's a little bit hard to list. So you always want to start with like the most recent and most relevant roles and go backwards. And sometimes it will make sense to actually stop at some point if you've had like 12 experiences or something, because that's not so relevant what you've done 20 years ago, but it's really relevant what you've done 5 years ago. And so you want to start with the most recent experiences and kind of walk me through them as if that's your portfolio. You want to speak a little bit about the role, the setup, the things that you've done, the things that you've learned, the things that you've achieved. Can you also connect each experience? For example, you can say, and before that, I worked in the company X, and I left my previous company just because I felt like I wanted more growth, and that company was exactly offering me that. So you want to always kind of explain why you left one company and joined another, because you don't want to seem like as a person just who comes and goes, right? You always want to give that logical explanation how you were building your career and what is it that these companies to give you to make you very happy. You also want to give like clear reflections of what you've done, learned, and failed. And it doesn't have to be all of that, because you will be like, Lena, but you give me 5 to 7 minutes, and that's kind of a lot of stuff that I have to talk about. Totally okay. You want to maybe say that I left that company because I realized that, maybe the design maturity wasn't there. And I realized it through that project where we did X, Y, Z. So you want to give me that story and kind of, show me. Basically, what you're trying to do is to showcase me that you have this ability to self-reflect and project into what a great role is going to look like. You want to show me a very clear motivation once again, why you want to join my company. Don't go crazy, go through their website. Like, what are they saying? I used to work at Miro, and people would come in, and I always thought it was like genuinely, great motivation to join, because they said, I started using Miro. And I actually, by the way, joined Miro for the same reason. They would say, I started using Miro when the COVID hit and we all were sitting at home. And that was that one tool that brought playfulness in our collaboration. And I want to help to build that company, because that really changed the way how I felt in this very isolated time. Don't you think that's inspirational, that a person would feel this connection to the company that they may work? So employers want to see people that kind of, see a little bit of this personal connection to the team. And once again, the less question you leave in my pocket, the better. Don't feel afraid if the recruiter says, well, actually, I have not much to follow up with. Like, that's it, and we're going to be moving forward. It's a very, very good sign. It just means that you hit all the boxes. Let us really build up that plan, that like checkbox of how your pitch could look like, because I understand that it's a lot. You need to think about many things as you pitch, and you also have, of course, a very limited amount of time. So I suggest this structure, and basically all the students of my course, all the clients that came to one-on-one, everyone is using exactly the same structure. And they have been telling that they even receive feedback like, this is the best pitch I've ever had, from recruiters that interviewed them. So that is working, folks. So first of all, start with your background. You want to say like, this is how I got into design, or maybe like, I've been in design for that many years. And once again, maybe you want to say like, I worked across those industries, those platforms, those B2B, B2C, whatever products. Then afterwards, you want to move into your most recent experience as the very first experience that you can describe. And you want to speak about your role. You want to speak a little bit about the environment. That was a startup of 200 people. You want to mention maybe your design team. So like, my design team was 10 people, but I was a solo designer in my team. So that all gives me insights about scale. They can work with other designers. So yes, they can work alone. That's exactly what we need. You want to mention stakeholders. I worked with PM and 3 engineers. We had a researcher. We didn't have a researcher, and I had to be a researcher. That gives me an insight simply of, have you worked with a true cross-functional team or not? Did you wear several hats or not? And there's no right or wrong. It depends on the role that you're going after. But this is a very important piece of information for me. Then you want to move into the problems. Like, what were you solving for? So like, when I started working there, that was our strategy, and that's what we prioritize as the main user pain point. And like, that was it. You want to tell me how you came up with solutions. So of course, you're not going to be describing me the whole process, but maybe like, you want to tell that we did some research and I interviewed 20 customers, and this is what we found out. And that's what the solution looked like. You want to tell me about the outcome of this solution. And of course, what was the impact? What were your learnings? What is it that you've taken from this project and going into the next one? And as you finished, you can go to the next role and repeat the same structure. To make it a little bit easier to pitch yourself on the conversations, you can also even make like a checklist on the sticky and put it on your laptop, and literally as you pitch, just looking at it and making those mental checks, being like, okay, I've talked about that, and then go ahead and basically speak about each and every role that you want to present. And once again, what's really important to remember, every good narrative, every good story has 3 parts to it. And this is how simple it is. It has the beginning, the middle, and the end. Your beginning is how you got into design. Your beginning is what drove you into it. Your middle is basically what you've done in your career. And the end is your motivation. So if we break it down properly into like very clear bullet points, we set the stage at the beginning. My background is that many years in design. I got into research by doing X, Y, Z. My role and title in that company was this. the environment that I was working was this. The stakeholders that were involved were these. So we want to set the stage. We want to make sure that the first time listener understands what we have been experiencing. The middle is the challenge and the approach. So basically, we want to make sure that it's very, very clear what was the challenge of every project that we worked. We want to make sure that they understand how we came up with the solutions. What were the steps that we've taken? Did we come up with the solution or not, even, right? So sometimes it would be a very interesting thing to pitch, being like, we actually thought that was the main problem, but at the end it wasn't. And this is what I learned from it. And so the part where you say, we thought it was, but it wasn't, was like the middle of your pitch, the middle of your story per role. And then, of course, implementation. How did you make it real? How did you bring your solution to life? And quite often, you could also speak about different competencies that make you, once again, standout candidate. We identified what the solution needs to be, but I had a very complicated stakeholder and they didn't want to follow through. And so I had to actually maybe set up like a workshop and really convince them that that was the right way to go. How powerful. You're already going into the next competencies that potentially the team members would need to dive into, but you're already giving me that information in your high level pitch. How cool is that? And then the end, of course, what came out of it. And you always have to think about the end of each and every small part of your story. There needs to be outcome, there needs to be impact, there needs to be learning. And at the very end of your pitch, there needs to be the closing the loop kind of part. And now this is where I am in my career, this is where I am with my life, and this is what this role that I'm interviewing for is going to bring and how it's going to contribute into my development, into my life, into what I want to become. And this is how you just close each and every loop with the beginning, so setting the stage, with the middle, like how I approach problems, and the end. This is what came out of each and every project that I've had. And this is what I'm trying to do with my application process in your company and the impact I'm going to try to bring. So that's pretty much it. That's how you pitch yourself. The best ways to train is to go to the meetups and pitch to different people. Yes, it feels cringe. It's actually really, really powerful. And everyone tells me that it's super cool because people start actually taking it on board and everyone starts pitching the same. And it's really, really cool because you can learn a lot about people, but you also can experience that uncomfortable feeling and not to have it anymore. And also what's really powerful is to actually make a video of yourself pitching and then rewatch it. And then afterwards kind of, highlight what was good, what could have been better, and do it again for a couple of times. This is what lots of speakers do with their talks. This is what I do. Very cringe with podcasts and stuff, but that's how we all become better. And if anyone wants to get in touch, Sophia is going to be sharing, of course, the links. But I write a lot about successful applications, pitch. I give lots of talks, and there's a lot of free materials as well that I'm sharing through LinkedIn, Substack, and my website as well. So everyone can follow through and get more information. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So first of all, thank you for the presentation, for the talk. Before we dive into the live Q&A, I actually have a question that popped up during one of the things you mentioned, and that's like during the pitch, we should explain why we want the role, right? But also why we are leaving the current role. Do you have any tips for those who are doing it for the first time, so they don't have any like previous experience, and how can they best frame it? Because at the end of the day, not everyone is going to be that interested in not interested, they won't have a lot of things to back them up and say hey, this is how I can bring value. So how can they maybe format that?
Yeah, for sure. And I think like if we're speaking about very junior roles, like out of college or just people who career changes, for example, I think that's really important to understand that you need to more project rather than like reflect. So you need to be projecting different skills, maybe even social skills that you have and how they helped you. So like lots of folks from universities will be speaking about university projects and how they led them, how they executed them, and how that helped them to understand that they can think outside the box, work with ambiguity, work like in the faster timelines and things like that. So I don't see any problem with not having this like strong explanation of what they've done. And if you don't have any prior experience, you don't have any prior experience. There is nothing bad about it, and that's a reality. We all started somewhere. I think it's just really important then to spend more time on speaking how you and your soft and hard skills that you've learned gonna help you be successful in this company that you're applying for. And the second part of the advice, many folks also asking what to do if you actually been laid off, because many people don't feel very comfortable speaking about it. And if you've been laid off, maybe you love your role, and you want to do the same stuff now because that was a perfect thing. And I highly recommend not to feel embarrassed about being laid off, not to feel that this is something that you have to hide from someone, because I want to remind everyone that recruitment process is a two-side conversation. There is a hiring team and there is you, and you both need to like each other. And so if the hiring team has any toxic kind of attitude or problems with people being laid off from roles because of the restructuring, poor money management from the company, poor planning and things like that, it's a very toxic sign that that's not the environment that you may want to work. And I understand that everyone has to pay the bills, but I also remind everyone that burnouts, for example, are very expensive hobbies to have. And so you definitely need to understand that, if you feel like this uneasy kind of environment and you don't feel that you can actually, or you say that like, actually I've been laid off, and the company reacts in a way that kind of raises questions, be okay to raise those questions and ask yourself, is that the employer I want to be working for?
Should we explain if we were a part of a layoff? Like, I guess that people might get into that, like over explaining themselves and say like, yeah, but it was like a company layoff. Yeah, I wasn't the only one fired, blah, blah, blah. So do you think that's a good approach, or?
It's a really good question. Like, how much time should I spend on explaining that, yes, that happened to me? I don't think that this is something like you should be investing in. You could say like, unfortunately, my role was terminated because the company had restructuring, lack of funding. You don't have to say how many people got laid off with you. You don't have to say it was just me or not me. You were in a small startup and it was 3 people. Maybe that was just you, but that was a layoff. It doesn't matter. I think what's important to say that, this is what I've done. This is what I've learned. Yes, unfortunately, that's how it happened. Regardless of that, this is what I'm looking at next. So, once again, we going from reflection into projection and not spending too much time on explaining the details that everyone should know by now, literally.
Cool, thank you. That's it for my questions, and I see a lot of questions already for you. So if you don't mind, I will bring up the first one. And the first one comes from maybe somebody who joined us a little bit late, but I would love to maybe in a few sentences just re-explain the process, like what people go through here and when is the best time to really pitch yourself.
Yeah, that's good, and I'm happy to do that because so basically, when you speak with recruiters and hiring managers, you want to highlight you want to share the highlights of your experiences. This is basically how I frame the question. Can you share like the highlights of your experiences? So you want to say, that was the company, that was the role, that was like the project that I worked for, like with or for whatever. This is what we've done, this is what we achieved, this is what came out of it. And as you share that, you maybe want to give a little bit of like setup of the environment. So that was a very fast startup. We had a team of 20 designers. I was a solo designer on the team. It was 3 of us working on it, but that part of the product was mine. So you want to set up the stage. You don't want to overload anyone with too much information. So maybe per role, you want to pick up 1-2 key projects. You want to start with the latest experience and go backwards. And maybe also invite a recruiter or hiring manager to pause you if there is something very interesting in the experience that you're explaining. And then you can dive into that. Something that I would love to kind of add to it, that the question is reminding me a lot of, is that your conversation with the recruiter is as important as a conversation with any other team member of the hiring team. So I've experienced many times in my career that I go into the conversation, like as an in-house recruiter, I'm actually a part of the hiring team. And I meet with the candidate, and the candidate does not seem to be motivated to share any information with me and just keeps on saying, well, when I speak with the team, this is what I'm going to share. Or like, when I speak with the team, this is what I'm going to say. I invite everyone to understand that if you don't give me enough information, there is no way you're going to speak with the team. Like, treat every conversation as the most important conversation. And even if you get the same question along several conversations, please don't show your frustration, even though it might feel frustrated, and it shouldn't be in the hiring process, but that happens. And if you do show your frustration, or if you say, well, check it in the scorecard or something, or if you answer very high level the last time just because you've explained already many times, it might be considered as a red flag. So is it a red flag that the company doesn't know what they're asking at each and every round? Potentially, but we also understand like context switching is really hard. Like many people jump from one meeting to another, and then they interview. So make sure that you treat every conversation as a very important conversation.
Thank you. And thank you for the question. I hope this answers it. We have another one that is very interesting from Daria. What question should I ask on a screening call, not to sound like I'm acting best on ChatGPT suggestions?
Yeah, that's a great question. What did we all do before ChatGPT? Like, we had to brainstorm. I think there are many good questions that you can actually ask recruiter, hiring manager, anything like that. Like recently, I was talking to my client, and they also said, like, I don't know what to ask. I personally, like, what I would ask is maybe more related to the culture of the team, of the company. I would potentially even ask a little bit about the funding, because like we want to make sure that we're going into the company that knows what they do. So you can ask something very personal, not to sound like ChatGPT, but you can say, what is your most favorite thing about the culture? Like, if you could change something tomorrow, what would that be? If you could keep something in this company, or maybe even bring to the next role of yours, what would that be? I had this question asked, and I think it's very good way to understand a little bit more of a personal perspective of a person on the company, and also not to sound like, tell me a little bit about culture in the company. Like, what kind of question is that? Like, what is it that you want me to tell you about? I also think it's totally okay to ask, like, can you tell me a little bit about the situation about your funding? What is your runway? Like, how do you imagine your business to become profitable, and how many years? Like, what is your plan for growth? Like, are you going to be growing the team? Like, is there any anticipation for any restructuring? Those are all very valid questions at this point to ask. You can also ask a little bit about how the company has been responding to this crisis, right? So like, how you've been responding to this crisis. Like, have you had promotion cycles? Like, how the company is approaching growth in challenging times, growth of the talent. So like, how do you make sure that even with the restricted budgets, there is still space for culture to thrive? All of those questions is something that you want to know, because you are gonna become a part of this company. So yeah, something like that could be a good way to go.
Thank you. Another question from Vivian. I've cleared multiple interviews, but somehow my final managerial round doesn't go through. How to tackle that? I guess this can also apply to not non-managerial as well, I guess, wherever we fall out of the process.
For sure. And that's a very good question. It's actually, it's a very common struggle that people go through most of the funnel, and it all looks good. And then they get rejected at the final runs, which is very interesting, because most of the time, most of the talent would actually fall out on the task, or like the whiteboarding challenge, or like anything that has to do with craft. So, what I would suggest to doing is actually kind of looking back, and maybe even going to some of these companies and trying to understand what is the pattern. So what is it that they expected? What is it that you delivered? And what's in between as the gap? Like, what is it that you didn't hit? That is going to help you understand like where exactly you fall short in expectations of the company, because final round tends to be round with the leadership or a founder or something like that. And so quite often what they want to make sure that you are the fit for the culture, and B, you're like more strategic basically, or like more senior, right? So like they may ask you about improvements for the product, like, have you checked the website? Like, what would you say? They may give you something that has nothing to do with your job and be like, what would you do? Like, check your strategy, check how you think on your feet as well. Or they may challenge you a little bit on culture and see how you behave when you're being a little bit pressured or like grilled on the interview. Don't approve those things, but that might happen. And so by asking those, like, where exactly I fell short would help you understand. And the forward thinking suggestion that I can give to anyone who gets rejected at any stage of the process, quite often you get rejected just because you don't know what is expected from you. And that's something that most of the candidates do. And that's literally my free advice that's going to save a lot of time to everyone. Before each and every interview, you have to follow up with the recruiter if they haven't done it. And you need to understand what types of questions you're going to be asked, what competencies the team is going to try to assess throughout the process, what competencies at each and every round you need to showcase. Because if you don't know what they're assessing, how can you give good examples? If you don't know what kind of questions they're going to be asking, how can you prepare mentally and get into that headspace that's going to give the most insights? I honestly think half of the success of the application processes is how much you as the candidate know what's going to be happening at each and every round. And that's like my responsibility as a recruiter, but it's not a standard across industries somehow. So you as a candidate need to be proactive. Hi, Lena, I'm having an interview with the hiring manager in 3 days. I've been thinking about what to prepare. Would you help me understand what competence is going to be assessed so I can prepare better? Or would you tell me whether I should share my screen with the pitch deck or with the slide deck? Or, is it going to be more ad hoc conversation? Do you want me to share something up front? Or should I prepare it for the call? All of those things are just going to give you peace of mind because you know what's going to be expected, and B, show your motivation, show that you know how hiring processes go. It shows your simple maturity as a candidate as well, and that's definitely like a big plus.
And a good point on following up. I've seen a few comments already, and let me bring one up. What is the best way to follow up? You just gave an example, but if you haven't heard back for after an interview round, and when do you think is it really a sign of ghosting now?
I love this question. Thank you so much for asking that. Like, let's dive into that a little bit because, so, I mean, first of all, if you applied, to get the rejection email if you don't go through, but sometimes it's not going to happen. But like, if it doesn't happen, just like move on, because unfortunately it became kind of like a norm because people also apply with hundreds and hundreds of applications. Like, it's not a joke that companies receive thousands of applications and 50% of them are not even the type of candidates that they're looking for. And a good follow-up strategy after each and every round would be that you follow up after 2 business days, for example. Hey, it was very nice to talk to you. I'm looking forward to receiving feedback. If you don't receive anything, you want to wait for 2-3 days and follow up again. Hi, I just, I can imagine that your inbox is very busy. Just bring myself on top of it. Looking forward to hearing from you. And if you still don't hear it, you might want to open the door a little bit to the type of feedback that you're open to. Because the problem is, and especially if you had like a task or like a conversation with the team, if it's more like on your soft skills, like maybe your communication wasn't on point, or maybe you're not like senior enough, it's not a very easy feedback to give. And like, believe me, lots of people get very defensive and almost like aggressive if you give that feedback. So that's also, it's a tricky thing to deliver in a very like I want you to grow, and so I give you this feedback, but please don't attack me back for it, because like lots of people get very defensive. And if I put it in the email, then you can go and kind of start being like, can you imagine what they told me? And unfortunately, like many candidates did it, and now it's a little bit more company-driven market, employer-driven market. And so many employers choose not to give feedback, which I think is ridiculous, but it's what's happening. So what you want to do in the third follow-up is be like, hi, Lena, still very excited about the process. haven't heard from you, and I just wanted to make sure that, like, there is a chance for feedback. So please, can you share feedback maybe on my presentation skills? Maybe there was something about my communication that you think I could have done better. Maybe, the team had some feedback on my visual craft, because this is something that, like, I care about a lot and things like. So open up the door for the type of feedback that you're going to be okay with. And that's definitely going to show me as a recruiter or as a hiring team the signal that, like, I can share this feedback. Also, definitely suggest hop on the call like with the recruiter. That's totally okay. I personally would always hop on the call with you rather than share an email. But there are good recruiters, there are bad recruiters, there are busy recruiters, there are recruiters who make time for those kind of things. And something that I also want to add, as a recruiter, like, if I screened you and you didn't pass, even I don't feel obligated to explain why exactly you didn't pass, because I had a job description, you read it, you didn't hit the points, and so I'm moving on. Because as the in-house recruiter, I'm gonna have tens of calls, because everyone is attacking, like, those applications. So if you get rejected from the recruiter screen, for example, and still, if you get rejected, if you got an email and you want feedback, you might try to follow up, but I invite everyone to be totally okay with not getting feedback. It just means that you didn't hit, like, the bar for the role, and it can be your communication skills, can be your skills, can be a combination of everything. However, as soon as you spoke with someone from the team, like hiring manager, regional team, like leadership, this is the space where every company should be giving feedback. And so this is the space where I 100% recommend really going after that feedback. And sometimes what also helps, if a recruiter doesn't like respond to you, it's not about being sneaky or anything. Like, just like getting feedback helps you get better. Like, this is your right as a candidate to get feedback on all the failures that you've made and all the good things that you've showcased, and bring it to the next process. So if you're not getting any correspondence from a recruiter, and I would still try a recruiter for 3 follow-ups, you can go on LinkedIn, find the team member that you've spoken, or like a hiring manager, and be like, hey, I totally understand if you don't want to proceed with my candidacy, and it's totally okay, but, like, I am actively interviewing, and every piece of feedback is a piece of gold that I'm going to use to my advantage. So please share it with me. ChatGPT will help you to make it collaborative and polite, as I usually ask in my prompt, because it should sound like it. But I highly recommend also reaching out and making sure that you used all the doors before you actually move on.
Great. Thank you. And we still have around 10-ish minutes left. So we'll kind of go back. This was maybe one of the last questions. A very interesting one from Salvatore. I wanted to know what Lena thinks about how larger companies generally view entrepreneurial experience on designer portfolios. How is this approached when compared to someone who is more experienced as an employee at a company?
That's a very interesting question, indeed. I actually don't think I've ever received such. I would say it's not about the type of employment. Okay, so if you're actually going for a startup, your entrepreneurial experience is a big plus, because even if you had a startup and you didn't succeed, I don't care. You are the person who's taking risks. You can wear different hats, as we love to say. You're able to think strategically. You're able to build things from scratch. Like, this is super important. So, like, is it an advantage when you go for a startup? Yes. Is it a disadvantage or an advantage if you go for a big company? I would say it depends. It depends what the big company needs, because you see, within the big companies, there are also different teams. Like, thinking back at Miro, we would have teams where you would be like the third designer, or we would have products that would have to be built from scratch. And so if you've worked like last 10 years as a founder, for example, 5 years, and only worked in small startups before, and now you go for a company like Meta or even Miro, for example, maybe we would start questioning, can you work at that scale? Can you work across different cross-functional teams? Can you work in the design team of 100 people? Because it's a very different type of communication, rituals, avoiding silos, not building the same things from different sides. Because when you one designer, there is no one else who is building things. So that could be tricky then for you. However, if you go into the company that is big, but they build in like a new function or a new tool or a new feature, whatever, something 0 to 1, for example, like as a business unit or the product proposal, then that could be very beneficial, because once again, it's the same skills you need to bring as you use in your entrepreneurial experience. So what I would suggest is not necessarily thinking about the size, but thinking what is exactly that they try, like what is their problem. And I think it's a very interesting switch of mindset, because many designers and researchers, when they start applying for jobs, they start being candidates. But you still, designers and researchers, think what is it, the problem that they trying to solve? Like what is the main pain point of a company that you can solve as a designer, and pitch to that. And it doesn't matter necessarily. Sometimes we will disregard your backgrounds or anything like that, just if you get us so well, and able to pitch into that problem. So I would definitely think, suggest thinking a little bit more about like, what is it that they try to solve and build, and how you fit into that picture.
And that's a really interesting point, because made me think, but also I just saw a similar question here. In enterprise UX, job descriptions are often vague, and company info is high level. So what's the best way to understand or search for it, what they truly expect from a designer, and prepare accordingly?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, vague, it's still job descriptions, right? Like, there are still lots of signs. In my course, I actually teach that if you go and like, what will you do? Like the first couple are the primary tasks, and that's the primary skills that you will also have. And the rest, like, they're like nice to have, because like you cannot do like too many things. So, like focus on the top, because that's just like psychology, once again, how company is built. And if the job description doesn't make any sense, you just have to go and ask your recruiter, what is it exactly that I'm going to be doing, and pitch towards that.
So look for it. But yeah, there is also some of it already there. Interesting one, very operational. Can you have a list of prepared questions and answers on the side to read off for answering questions?
I would highly recommend not to do that, because I can always see when you read. And honestly, if someone starts reading, might like, why? You don't know what you've done. You don't know what you're trying to explain it. And that's why I also say, like, for a pitch, for any of the answers, you can have like some keywords maybe, or like, in that company, like, oh, that's the project that I want to talk about. But if you start reading, what are you gonna do if I'm gonna put you into the meeting with my founder? You're gonna read, like, that's just simple. Like, I cannot see how you can be successful in the work environment if you cannot explain your experience to me in the comfort of your home, because people used to go to the offices to interview. Now we're actually at home. Put some stickers if you need to remember things. But no, please don't read. And I think it's totally okay to have your questions written down. Like, this is what I want to ask the recruiter. 100%. I highly encourage to have a notebook and a pen, or even like to do notes on your laptop when you ask questions and get answers, or anything like that. You can also, maybe write down the questions that you've been asked, or you can ask, like, can I use my note taker in the interview with the recruiter? Like, I have no problems, honestly. Like, I'm using a note taker. You should also be able to do that, because you want to do the bank of questions that everyone is asking you, and then train for them. But please do not read, because honestly, I think like now, if I would see that someone reads on my interview, I would not even continue the interview. I would just stop and be like, I'm sorry, I don't think this is going to work, because like, especially if it's like a senior role, that's just something that I expect you to be able to do, to talk about your experiences.
Good to know. And last question before we close everything down is, I think, a great for closing, and that's, if I switched careers, should I try to frame my previous experience as relevant, even though it's a completely different role? So what I want to add a little bit on more like context on that. So if I were to switch careers and going back to your pitch and your formula for a pitch, how should I then like present myself? How should should I present my learnings, or should I focus more on my motivation for going into a new role? How should we frame it?
This is a great question, and like career switchers do have a very interesting but big challenge of like creating that narrative that speaks about skills that they still to develop, kind of, like there is some level of it, but still like, there are not many experiences yet. You're not a junior person anymore. So I think what's really important to do, and it's in your pitch, in your CV as well, is to for sure understand what are transferable skills and experiences that you've done in your previous roles and how it translates to your role that you're going after, and be able to pitch on that. So like if you've never worked as a product designer, but you worked as a product analyst, you worked with deadlines, you worked with stakeholders, you prioritized tasks, maybe you had some problems, you work with a lot of data, and all of those things are extremely relevant, right? So like only this craft part of design layers on top of it, because like there is a lot of that work that you're going to be doing. So I think that's really important to kind of say like, this is what I've done and this is how I can work with data, stakeholders, problems. But that's what made me realize that I also want to solve for users, and that's what drove me into UX. And then I did this and that, and that's how I learned. Maybe you did a pet project, maybe you did like a bootcamp project, and you go into details of that project. And then you say, and now I'm interviewing like with your company because yes, I bring my very strong experience and like background in like business analytics, but I also now learned all this UX stuff and UI stuff. I'm very passionate about it. Like, this is what I've done, as I've explained, and this is what I'm doing right now. So yes, it's definitely challenging, but just think, honestly, if you don't know how to even translate it, write down all the tasks and major achievements that you've done in your previous career and bring it to ChatGPT and say, I'm applying for a product design role, and this is what I've done in my previous experience as a business analyst. How would you pitch? Like, how would you translate? Like, what are the skills and experiences that are transferable? And that's going to be a great starting point for you to understand a little bit how much more you can connect it as a story for the employer.
That's very, very cool. Thank you. And that would be it for the time we have for today. So thank you, Lena, once again for joining us. Hopefully this was a fun session for you, and to everyone who joined us live, thank you so much for being so active, and thank you for asking all the questions. You will, of course, receive the recording in your email and also Lena's contact, so you can stay in touch with her and also get all of her amazing resources. And if you would like to get some also feedback on how you present yourself, if you want to find designers that can give you some peer feedback, you can also join our community on Discord. Happy to also connect you with people there. And we're always looking for ways to improve these sessions, so if you have some time, feel free to leave us some feedback. We appreciate it. And yeah, stay tuned for all of the upcoming webinars that we have going on. You can follow us here on YouTube or on our Luma page. Lena, before we wrap it up, is there anything else you want to say to everyone?
I guess I'm just gonna, wish everyone luck and say that a lot of success is just belief in yourself and confidence in your ability. And it's tough out there, but it's possible. So good luck, folks.
Oh, thank you so much. That's wonderful. Thank you. And yeah, see you all next time.
Thank you.